Are you expecting a new child to come into your life and do you not know what you should be testing your water for and what kind of things can cause problems for you and your newborn? Today, I want to get into it with you and tell you kind of what you should be looking at, what kind of tests you should be taking, and what does the EPA recommend? So let's go ahead and hop into it. So we all know that water is very important, right? It's what we drink every single day. We get it from bottles, we get it from the tap, we get it from the fridge, we get it from everywhere, right? Water is very important, but the hardest part about having good, clean, safe water is if you don't test for it, do you really know is your water safe, right? So we need to discuss things that you can't see. Now, a majority of the water contaminants are so small and nondescript that you as a person, the odds of you being able to taste the difference, not much, right? So what do you test for? Well, the easy answer is bacteria, right? That's obvious. You should test to see if there's any kind of funky little bits floating around in your water. Well, that's not the only thing you should be testing for, right? But let's stick on the bacteria section. So whenever it comes to annual well water testing, you should also be considering public water testing, but that's a little bit more regulated, so there's a lot more oversight from the government and local counties involved, right? So we'll cover public in a few minutes. But the EPA recommends test your water at least once a year for both bacteria and for nitrates, right? Two different things, but we'll stick with the bacteria for now. Bacteria can naturally occur in well water. You could have it pop up from 6 miles down the road. There could be a whole big storm coming in, and maybe there's not a whole lot of filtering media, and all that stuff works its way into the aquifer, and then it basically contaminates it. That's possible. You could also have somebody who poorly develops their well and they let other surface contaminants get into the well to cause problems. Maybe there's a gas station leak, right? That lets contaminants into your water. Doesn't let bacteria, but it lets other not so fun things in there. So bacteria can pop up no matter how well you take care of your system. So that you gotta make sure you test for it to see whether or not it shows up. So with a private well, you're gonna wanna go to a certified lab. They sell at-home test kits, which you can do. You just got to be careful that sometimes if you don't do the test correctly, or maybe it's a less than a reputable producer, you might get a false positive. Again, not a huge issue, but you can deal with it. So you hire somebody. Now, in the state of Maryland, it's a pass-fail. It's an all or nothing thing, right? You either have bacteria or you don't have bacteria. But you can also do a count, right? So let's just say that, for example, you already failed. You want to see how much bacteria is in the well. You treat the well with chlorine or whatever other method you decide you want to do it with. You treat the well, and then you measure again to see, okay, maybe we had a 90% reduction in bacteria. Still not great, but at least you knocked most of it out. And then you can kind of tailor your next steps accordingly. So if you have the bacteria in the water, it's essentially basically as if you were to take a leak into your bathtub. You still kind of peed in the bathtub, right? It's still going to have a little bit in there, no matter if it's just a little squirt or if it's the whole thing, right? Not what you want to be swimming with. Same concept goes with bacteria in your well. Two different types that usually you'll see show up on a lab report. You'll see total coliform, which is just kind of like a blanket statement for, hey, there's bacteria here. It's just all of the above, not being really, really specific. And then you got E. coli. Now, that's the one that comes from your belly, right? Most common failures I'll see for this is if you have your well next to cows, chickens, horses, goats, any of the farm animals, or if your septic system is in close proximity to the well. Now, if we go further out west towards like the Hagerstown, Apple Valley area, sometimes that can just occur because of the type of geology that's over there. So a lot of times the next step, you just put an ultraviolet light in, and then that solves the problem. If you have bacteria, the first thing that you usually will do is you'll chlorinate the well. Now, chlorinations will disinfect everything and kill off all the itty-bitties that are floating around in there. You need to be careful where you'll hear a lot of people discuss put a gallon of bleach in there regardless of the size of the well, and then it'll kill the bacteria. It's not entirely true. There's actually a mathematical formula to figure out how much chlorine needs to go into the well, and I usually recommend some kind of pelletized or powderized version, right? Bleach is just diluted chlorine, so you'll need more of it to hit the correct parts per million. Check with your local health department on what their guidance is for proper sanitization of a well, and just be careful. You're working with chemicals, right? If you don't know what you're doing, you can hurt yourself or hurt somebody else. So make sure you're conscious, do your homework before you start putting any kind of chemicals into your drinking water, right? If the chlorination doesn't work, because sometimes it doesn't work, the next step is an ultraviolet light. And basically what it is a light bulb that just blows a whole bunch of ultraviolet light at the water, kills off any of the floating bits, and then it goes off into the rest of the house. If you're going to do an ultraviolet light, it's very important to make sure that you also have a sediment filter prior to the ultraviolet light, so if there's any particulates or debris, it gets caught there and doesn't allow a place for the bacteria to hide. But remember though, not only are we testing for bacteria, we also have to test for nitrates. And you might be asking, what is a nitrate? And the simplest term is it's basically nitrogen. Now, I will usually see failures for nitrates if your house or your well is in close proximity to a farm, an active farm, animal cultivation like pastures and stuff, or if the house was built on an old farm. That's usually where we'll see most of our nitrate contaminants. Now, nitrates generally not that expensive to test, just like bacteria, right? If you bring it to the lab or do your own at-home test, you can usually get pretty close. But what it can cause is it can cause blue baby syndrome as well as other health defects. There's also other things that can happen to adults, but the primary one is blue baby syndrome, and nobody wants that. It's very scary and very sad. So it's very important to make sure that if you are pregnant or planning on having a child, that you need to know what's in the water, right? And you should also keep in mind that the water that you use for formula is the same water that you'll be given to your baby. So if you got bacteria in there, you got nitrates in there, that's kind of a problem that you want to make sure you get addressed. The EPA, like I said, recommends once a year testing for bare minimum nitrates as well as bacteria. But there are other contaminants that you need to consider testing for as well. And that's kind of where it comes into, what does the VA or the FHA look for when you're purchasing a house? And the reason I bring this up is I think that their standards are a lot more strict compared to the recommendation from the EPA. And the reason why is they want to make sure that they're lending money to you to purchase your house, and the house is safe and livable for you to live in, so that's why they want you to test the water. So the difference between what the VA recommends and what the EPA recommends is really going to come down to lead, iron, and turbidity. The other stuff like your nitrates, nitrites, and bacteria are also encompassed in that, but the VA takes it a little step further by testing for heavy metals. Now, lead. You might be saying, well, my house was built in 2000. Where can lead possibly come from? The lead usually doesn't come from the well itself. It'll usually come from internal plumbing in the house or the faucet. Maryland State says that even if your home is new-ish, right? Let's just say it was built in the 1990s to now, where maybe it's CPVC or PEX or some other plastic type of piping. Well, there's no lead solder, so the only way that the lead could get in there would be maybe your pressure tank, maybe the T-assembly, maybe the spigot that you're getting the sample from, right? If you're not testing from there, you don't know for sure that there's no lead in your water. Older homes are far more likely to have lead in the water, and the reason why is how they would join the copper pipes together was with lead, right? Nowadays we use a silver solder. You don't have to necessarily worry about that. But if you have copper pipes, you also need to make sure you're checking for the lead, right? Regardless of the age of the house, I always recommend it. Just better be safe than sorry. There's a little bit of prep work that goes into taking a lead sample, right? Let's just say that the house has been vacant for 3 weeks. It's probably going to fail, right? And the reason why is how the lead gets into the water is contact time. So if you have a low pH of the water, so it's acidic, right? The longer that water is sitting in that pipe at a low pH, the more it's leaching all that lead. That's why you always hear people talk about copper pipes having pinhole leaks. Well, you know where the pinhole leak comes from? Is the water's leaching that metal out and corroding it and allowing it to just kind of turn to paper until eventually the water pressure pushes a hole through it. So you want to test for the lead. Turbidity is the other item that they'll usually recommend on the VA inspection for water. And basically turbidity is just a fancy way of saying suspended solids, or how clear is the water. If you have very turbid water, it's very likely that you're going to have issues with iron, at least in our area. There could be other things like your chlorides, etc., that are in the water, but most commonly turbidity is going to be associated with iron, brown water, right? Iron can also cause problems, but it needs to be in higher volumes compared to lead and nitrates. So usually when you test for iron, you're just trying to make sure that it's more of an aesthetic thing, right? There is a maximum contaminant level, but yeah, most houses, even the really gnarly ones around here, they don't usually hit that number. All of this is to be said that you need to make sure you check your water regularly. If you're a parent, or just even if you're a normal person, you need to make sure you're checking to see what's going on with your water so that way you're not going to get sick. Especially if you're expecting a child and maybe this is your first kid and you've never had to go through this before. I always just recommend give yourself the peace of mind. Test the water, see what's going on. It's always cheaper to bring it to a lab, but if you don't feel comfortable taking the samples, have somebody come to your house, take the samples, evaluate your water. Doing this is relatively inexpensive, and at least now you get the peace of mind of not having to worry about what am I actually feeding myself or feeding my child. I know that we covered a lot of ground on this one, and I hope that you found this informative, right? If you gained any value out of this, if you found this interesting, if you like this style of video, hit that like button, hit subscribe. I have more videos posted every day in the world of well and septic, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.